So your thoughts or images are more like these. Or maybe your experience with Latin America is a tastier one and is limited to On the Border or some other Tex-Mex restaurant. I think I'm okay showing that this morning, so that your thoughts and images look more like these pictures. And you know, none of these pictures by themselves are incorrect because they do represent parts of Latin America, but they don't represent the whole. Latin America consists of approximately 600 million people in 20 nations, as well as territories of Europe and the US. It is loosely defined as everything south of the United States, which includes Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. About 60% of the region speaks Spanish as their first language. 35% speak Portuguese as a first language, all of those in Brazil. And the remainder of the people speak Quechua, Mayan languages, Guarani, Aymara, English, French, Dutch, and Italian, and some lesser indigenous languages and dialects. You know, Latin America is also a diverse region culturally, ethnically, and linguistically. One commonality that most countries in Latin America share, however, is a similar religious background. 7 out of 10 Latin Americans identify as Catholics, but statistics show that very few attend Mass on a regular basis, and most would consider themselves as cultural Catholics only. Many of them have never read the Bible and do not know why they believe what they believe. And their faith and commitment is weakening because they do not seek to make their faith in God their own. Further, agnosticism, atheism, and skepticism of Christian beliefs are also growing at an alarming rate amongst the young people of Latin America. I know that doesn't sound real optimistic, but one great advantage that I believe we still have in sharing the gospel in Latin America is that most Latin Americans are still open to discussing religious topics, whether they are religious or not. I think for most Latin Americans, their spirituality is just below the surface, and therefore it is easier to start spiritual conversations with them. This in contrast to what we see here with Americans who have a tendency to compartmentalize and stuff their spirituality way down deep. Another major trend in Latin America is a major movement of people from the countryside to the cities. This is a trend that has been happening over the last 50 years and has resulted in the urbanization of the region. Over 80% of the entire region lives in cities, with Brazil leading the way at 90% of the population living in cities. 1 in 10 Latin Americans, or more than 60 million people, live in the 4 largest cities in Latin America: Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Buenos Aires. The cities are where people are moving to find jobs and a better way of life. Cities are where people believe that they will find opportunity and money to provide for themselves and their families. The cities of Latin America are seen as places full of hope and opportunity. And at Great Cities Missions, we feel exactly the same way. The name of our ministry comes from the belief that we need to work in the large metropolitan areas of Latin America. A further belief is that if strong, vibrant, God-honoring churches can be established in a city, then it can have an impact on the whole country. Ironically, this strategy is not a new one, but one that was practiced by those who established the early church. The socio-political environment of the first century is not that different from the one that we see today in Latin America. First, there was a common language that was understood by most people, Latin, although regional dialects were spoken as well. Additionally, there was a dominant culture that provided a common religion and culture to most people. Additionally, there were large migrations of people groups all over the Roman Empire that were moving into the cities. The Roman Empire was also a very urbanized culture. So we feel like we're in good company by working in the cities of Latin America, as that was also the strategy that Paul implemented on his missionary journeys. A good portion of the New Testament, beginning with the book of Acts and then with Paul's letters to the churches, deals with the mission churches that Paul has planted throughout the Roman Empire. Cities are important because they are hubs of influence for the region and for the country. One church historian has this to say about Paul's mission efforts. Paul concentrated on great cities, particularly the major seaports. He had come from the large city of Tarsus himself, and he preached in the great capital, Rome, and in Athens, the world's cultural center. Philippi was the chief city of Macedonia, as was Corinth in Achaia and Ephesus in Asia Minor. Antioch, Troas, Thessalonica, that's easy for me to say. All were great seaport cities. Establishing solid churches in such cities would provide centers for carrying the gospel throughout the world. Again, the idea is that you plant churches in the city that can then have an impact on the region and the country. So this morning, real briefly, I want to share with you about two of our most recent church planting teams that we've partnered with in recent months who are beginning to make just this kind of impact. The first one I want to share with you is a church planting effort in the city of Cucuta, Colombia. Cucuta is a large city that sits on the border of Colombia and Venezuela. The border between the two countries is defined by the Orinoco River. And a couple of years ago, a group of students from the Baxter Institute in Honduras contacted us about planting a church in the city of Cucuta. The reason that the mission team chose Cucuta is that one of the couples is from that city and felt that the church needed a mission team to share the gospel and plant a new church there. Now, to be honest, when I first heard about the mission team's desire to go to Cucuta, I remember thinking that it was a funny sounding name for a city, but not thinking much more about it. I really didn't know much about Cucuta at all. All that has changed in the last year plus as Cucuta has become a very important city because of the growing humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. In fact, last July, pictures began appearing in the news as the borders between Colombia and Venezuela were opened and thousands of Venezuelans entered Cucuta looking for food, medicine, and medical assistance. If you have heard or read in the news recently, then you know that the situation in Venezuela has become progressively worse, as most Venezuelans do not have access to the most basic of items for their home. Food is scarce, and household products are practically non-existent. Because of the scarcity of basic products, violence has also increased throughout the country. We have heard of a number of preachers and church members that have been held captive in their own homes while their houses were ransacked and everything of value was taken from them right in front of their families. Also, the most basic of medical needs are not being met because of a lack of medical supplies for hospitals and clinics. A recent report mentioned that many newborn infants are being placed in cardboard boxes because there are not adequate cribs available for new babies. I mention all of this to say that Cucuta is uniquely positioned to help with the humanitarian crisis. It is the main border crossing between Colombia and Venezuela, and this mission team that arrived there in February of last year was already making plans to figure out the best way to help play an important role in providing assistance to displaced Venezuelans in Colombia, as well as to find out the best way to get relief aid into the country of Venezuela itself, despite having had no idea that this crisis would be such an essential part of their mission when they answered God's call to plant churches there. We have worked with sister relief organizations who have partnered with Great Cities Missions and the Kukata team to help with medical supplies and other items that might be needed to help alleviate the suffering of those in Venezuela and meet their immediate needs. Our goal, as well as the goal of the Kukata mission team, is to demonstrate how the new church in Kukata can be a blessing to its community of Kukata and beyond, demonstrating God's grace and mercy while also preaching the good news of Jesus Christ. As a result of this great partnership and this team's tremendous efforts of being God's hands and feet in this great city, in under a year and a half, they've helped over 60 churches of Christ in Venezuela, distributed over 2,000 large bags of food, held a medical campaign with other U.S. brothers, and have helped well over 10,000 people. Praise God for their efforts. But through all this relief aid, they have not lost their focus on the initial goal, and Christ is building his church there as well. May 20th marked the one-year anniversary of the Kukata Church, and average attendance on Sundays exceeds 110 people weekly, with space issues becoming a challenge. And what a great challenge to have on a mission field. Further, the church, both its building and its body, has served as the main distribution point for the aid effort. Church members pack the bags, host the Venezuelan travelers, and feed them while they're there. It's been a great way for the local church to live out their new faith in significant ways. And not only that, but they have their own food distribution within the church where they bring items and then redistribute them to needy members. Does this remind anyone else of an early church example we might have read of? What an incredible display of God's working through his children, and what a significant foundation that's being laid in Kukata. Another example I want to share with you is a brand new North American church planting team who, though yet to officially launch the start of the new church, is already laying a strong foundation by lifting Jesus up in the city of São Luís, Brazil. This three-family team, all hailing from the Northside Church of Christ in San Antonio, Texas, has already faced tremendous adversity as 1/3 of their team had to withdraw due to a life-threatening illness that nearly took the life of one of the men of this three-couple team 2 weeks before their departure to Brazil. While certainly a blow that caused the remaining members to question many components of their future, not to mention would there even be a mission future, the now two-family team has stepped out in faith and continued with the vision to which they are confident God has called them. Besides mourning the loss of their dear friends and teammates and beginning to pray and start asking questions about whether or not some strategy plans might need to be altered in light of the new team composition, the only expectation that the team members, that the families had in these first 8 months on the field was to be adaptation and language acquisition. They, however, were praying that God would use them, even in the midst of the preparation period, toward the bigger mission. They had dreamed that their team and their supporting congregations would form new relationships in Texas and beyond. They also hoped that their efforts in São Luís would cause a ripple effect to the regions beyond the borders of the city for a greater good in Brazil. So with this serving as the backdrop, in March, the 4 adults agreed to help Jill and Melinda's language teacher, Saya, with a project for her friend, Paulo Velton, a Supreme Court justice for the state of Maranhão, the state where São Luís is. This small yes to an event they had no skills or experience to help with was truly multiplied like loaves and fishes. Through a blog post stating that they had offered to help with a course on common law, they were contacted by a member of one of their supporting congregations in Austin, the Brentwood Oaks Church of Christ. Jeff Boyd sent a message stating that he was a justice of the Supreme Court of Texas and had held similar conferences in Africa and wanted to help them in any way he could. And this is where God began to work in ways far greater than they could imagine. Jeff organized a team that they affectionately called the Justice League, who planned the curriculum and discussions, worked with the law school of Pepperdine University to help with funding, and through no efforts of the team other than saying yes to something beyond their capacities, the 10-hour course turned into a 3-day conference about the American common law system with approximately 100 judges, lawyers, and students at the Judicial Training Center in San Luis, culminating in the last presentation to a crowd of about 250 people. In their most recent blog post, much better than expected, the team relayed the following. Our prayer has been for God to give us opportunities to share with the people of San Luis why we are here. Our desire has been for God to grant us platforms to explain that He is the reason we moved to San Luis. This opportunity meant we would be able to be in front of people we normally would not have the chance to meet with and explain our mission. The way this all came about is a great example of how much better than expected things become when we are replaced with He. It was impossible and illogical to imagine we would host such an accomplished group of law experts in our new city in front of powerful decision makers in this particular avenue. It is interesting to look back and observe patterns. Yesterday's lenses are often much clearer than today's are, but they can be such gifts of affirmation. We have noticed that God keeps asking us to do things that seem much bigger than our abilities. Understatement intended. It has repeatedly been the case that He wants our commitment before we know the full picture of what we are committing to. What continues to amaze us, though, is how He takes a simple yes and turns it into a no way. No way did we just witness that. No way did we just get to do this. No way did that just happen except by the grace of God. We are batting 1,000 when it comes to God providing resources that are much better than expected. When we are asked to commit to something in an effort to bring Him glory, we want to live the abundant life. We want to live audaciously for God. Our Father does not want our abilities. He has them in spades. He doesn't need our ideas. His ways are higher than our ways. He doesn't want us to come to Him with a plan. He just wants us to follow His. It is, in our view, only because of who we are with that we will be able to do anything in San Luis. And that gives us great confidence. We have found that when we get out of the way and trust in who He is, the results are much better than expected. I thank God for the good work that has been done through these faithful church planners that are willing to say, "Here I am, Lord, send me," and then offering their loaves and fishes and watch what He can do with it. I also hope that you would ask yourself, could He be calling me to join Him in a church planting endeavor in Latin America? So my purpose here today is twofold. First, I want to proclaim the goodness and the power of God, who is still doing more than we could ask or imagine according to His power that is at work within servants such as these people in Cucuta and San Luis. Amen, and praise be to His name. But secondly, we're actively praying that God will raise up a team or two of Sunset students such as yourself to say yes to being part of a church planting team for northern Brazil, specifically the cities of Teresina and Macapá. Tomorrow night, I think it's been changed to 5:15. I'm going to be hosting a dinner up here, free dinner. Did you hear that? Free dinner. That any of you who could be interested, that would be interested in hearing more about these cities and possibly going on a survey trip with myself and David next March during campaign week. I'd love to tell you about that. I'd love for you to consider seeing if God may be calling you to that. So please come and talk to me afterward or talk to David in the next day or two. Would love to see you tomorrow. So I'll close by saying there's still much to be done in Latin America. And I want to read again what the brother read this morning from Luke chapter 10, 1 and 2. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." I'm grateful for all of you guys and your willingness to answer the call to be God's people, to be his servant, to want to see his kingdom come. And I pray that his kingdom will come on this earth and that he'll use us. But specifically, I pray today that his kingdom will come in Latin America. And my prayer is that some of you in this room may be a part of seeing that happen. Remember, tomorrow night, free food, exciting opportunity. Be there. May God bless you all, and que Deus seja louvado.